The sound of heels echoed like gunshots across the marble gallery of the mansion, a rhythm so sharp it seemed to pierce the calm of the afternoon. Marcus Cole, a 35-year-old tech millionaire, had come home early that Friday, thinking he might surprise his wife with lunch and finally breathe after a long week of meetings. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you believe in giving bullies exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. The sky outside was clear and soft, glossy light pouring through tall windows. But inside, another sound followed the heels, a dull thud and the frightened cry of a child. Marcus stopped at the entrance to the living room. His car keys slipped slightly in his palm when the scene before him arranged itself into something his mind resisted believing. 8-year-old Leah Grant was crumpled on the floor near the far wall, clutching a broken porcelain vase against her chest. A thin line of blood traced down her knee. Standing over her was Isabel Cole, his elegant, flawless, socially adored wife, her face distorted by fury so pure it stripped away every trace of charm. "Do you even know how much that vase costs?" she shouted, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at the terrified child. "More than your mother will make scrubbing my floors this entire year." The words sliced the air. Leah's lips quivered. Her eyes filled until tears spilled silently down her brown cheeks. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cole. I was cleaning like Mama told me. It fell when the noise from the TV scared me." "Liar." Isabel raised her hand, poised to strike again. Something inside Marcus moved from confusion to a terrible clarity. He stepped forward, voice cutting through the room like steel. "Isabel!" His wife froze mid-gesture, then turned. Instantly her expression morphed, rage evaporating behind delicate surprise. "Marcus, you're home early." Her tone sweetened, brittle. "This girl broke the Ming vase Nora gave us as a wedding gift. I was just handling it." Marcus's gaze shifted from his wife to Leah. The girl's small body curled in on itself. Every tremor, every flinch told him this moment wasn't new. A pattern hid behind it, years long perhaps, invisible because he'd never looked inside his own house. He felt the floor pull from under his feet. The woman he thought he knew, graceful, patient, cultured, was gone. In her place stood a stranger who looked down at a child not merely with anger but with contempt. For the first time in their marriage, Marcus Cole felt terror. Not of danger, but of truth. Leah's whimper snapped Marcus back to motion. He set the car keys on the polished table with deliberate calm, a sound so small yet so final that even Isabel's breathing paused. The girl shrank as he knelt beside her, careful not to startle her again. "Does it hurt, sweetheart?" he asked quietly. Leah gave a tiny nod, more afraid of speaking than of the pain itself. Isabel folded her arms. "Really, Marcus, you're going to make a scene over a broken vase? Children like her must learn consequences. They can't just barge into fine homes breaking—" "Enough," he interrupted, the single word quiet yet immovable. "Nora has worked here for nearly 10 years. Have you ever seen her daughter mishandle anything?" His wife's smile twitched, brittle as glass. "She's always underfoot, pretending to help her mother. It was bound to happen." Marcus looked again at Leah's small hand gripping the shard she still tried to hold together. "Go sit in the kitchen, Leah. I'll talk to your mother when she's back." The child hesitated, eyes darting toward Isabel, then back to him. That hesitation alone told him stories he wished he would never have to unearth. When Leah slipped out, her bare steps faint against marble, a silence stretched between husband and wife. Marcus turned fully to Isabel for the first time, studying her composed face the way an investor studies a document before discovering fraud hidden in the fine print. "How long have you spoken to her like that?" he asked. Isabel gave a short, dismissive laugh. "You're exaggerating. You've been buried in meetings and suddenly you want to play savior. I simply maintain order. Nora's daughter needs to understand her place, or she'll end up believing we're equals." The calmness of her tone chilled him more than the cruelty itself. For 3 years he had mistaken her poise for kindness, her control for responsibility. Sensing the change in him, Isabel tilted her head, voice softening to coax him back into her world. "Marcus, darling, you know me. I'd never hurt a child. I just lose patience sometimes. Her mother spoils her." But his eyes no longer read love there, only calculation. Bit by bit, the truth rearranged every memory he'd ever had of her. In that moment, Marcus Cole understood one thing. This was not an accident, nor an isolated slip. His home had been harboring quiet cruelty, and he had been too busy counting profits to notice. For the rest of that afternoon, the mansion seemed to breathe uneasily. Marcus waited while Nora came back from the market, her arms full of paper bags, tired from years of bending into corners. When she saw Leah's scraped knee and Isabel's forced smile, something in her eyes shuddered, like a light dimming behind glass. She only murmured, "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole," and tried to lead her daughter quietly toward the kitchen. But Marcus stopped her with a simple, careful question. "Nora, how long has Leah been afraid of my wife?" The older woman froze. Even the air seemed to hang. Isabel's voice sliced through quickly, syrupy sweet. "Marcus, please, don't embarrass our staff. She's under enough pressure already." Her husband's gaze didn't move. Nora's hands trembled slightly as she said, "Mrs. Cole keeps order, sir." Her tone was flat, rehearsed. A phrase burned into obedience. "Has she ever kept that order physically?" he asked. The silence that followed was heavier than confirmation. Leah looked up from behind her mother's skirt, eyes wide, silent confession sealed by fear. Marcus wanted to turn away, to retreat back into the boardroom world where numbers made sense, not feelings. But the sight of that child's caution broke something colder than anger, his own complacency. Later in the study, Isabel tried to patch what she sensed slipping away. She pressed a manicured hand against his arm. "You can't believe their sob story, Marcus. You of all people should understand hierarchy. My methods prepare that girl for reality. Kindness doesn't raise discipline." He pulled away slowly. Teaching discipline isn't the same as feeding humiliation. She laughed softly, the sound wrong now. "You're naive. Without rules, the poor think they're entitled to everything. You and your fairness crusades. You'll thank me someday." The sentence dropped like a stone in water. It was. Then Marcus realized every charity dinner, every elegant speech she made about compassion had only been another performance for social approval. Underneath all that grace lived contempt. He excused himself quietly and walked the silent halls, each polished surface reflecting the hollow perfection he'd mistaken for happiness. Behind every door could live another truth he had chosen not to see. And as the sun bled orange across the city skyline outside, Marcus Cole knew sleep would not come until he faced exactly how deep this illusion went. That night, Marcus didn't leave the house. While Isabel drifted from room to room, humming as if nothing had happened, he sat in his office staring at the blinking cursor on his laptop. All the logic that had built his career now turned inward, dissecting the personal empire he had built on ignorance. If you believe in giving bullies exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Pieces of the past rearrange themselves. A maid quitting suddenly, a chef too nervous to look his wife in the eye, the fragile smile Nora always forced when complimented. The pattern was unmistakable. He began taking notes, dates, behaviors, recollections of comments he'd brushed off as jokes. He would gather facts the same way he handled corporate audits, methodical, cold, precise. A half hour later, he sent a text to one of his legal contacts, Rachel Perez, a civil rights attorney he trusted more than anyone in his professional circle. Her reply came in less than a minute. "Call me. Now." On the call, after hearing every detail, Rachel's voice steadied him. "Marcus, emotional abuse and racial intimidation are crimes when they happen in a workplace. The law doesn't stop at the mansion gates." She paused. "Tomorrow morning I'll have 2 investigators at your house. You'll need recordings." When he ended the call, he found Nora at the kitchen table, still awake, gently rebandaging her daughter's knee. Isabel's perfume hung in the air like false sweetness. Marcus cleared his throat softly, and both mother and child looked up as if expecting trouble. "You're safe here," he said, lowering himself across from them. "And no one, no matter how wealthy, has the right to make you feel otherwise." Nora shook her head. "Sir, people like us don't win those fights." Marcus met her eyes. "We do when evidence speaks." The next morning, while Isabel prepared for a social brunch, Rachel's team quietly wired the house with discreet voice recorders. Within hours, Isabel gave them everything they needed. Snide orders, patronizing remarks, open threats whispered to staff when she thought no one else was listening. Each word confirmed what Marcus already feared. Cruelty wasn't a slip of temper. It was a system she'd perfected. And when she spoke that afternoon on the phone saying, "Some people should remember their place before they lose the privilege of entering my home," Marcus didn't interrupt. He only pressed record. The truth would speak in her own voice. By evening, Isabel prepared for a dinner meeting with donors. Her sequined gown shimmered as she checked her reflection one last time, humming a tune of triumph. Marcus watched from the doorway, silent, the weight of the recordings heavy in his pocket. Her vanity gleamed brighter than the chandeliers. To her, appearances were bulletproof armor. No one would dare doubt the smiling philanthropist adored by high society. She could mock, belittle, even wound, and still be toasted as graceful. When she left the room to take a phone call, Marcus slipped the recordings to Rachel's investigators waiting in the study. They had already set up a direct encrypted stream. Every word Isabel was about to say would be broadcast live to a closed network of Marcus's professional colleagues and board partners, people who knew both of them. Through the half-open door, he heard her voice cooling into its real register. "Yes, Mother, of course I scolded them. Someone has to keep these servants in line. Marcus is too soft. He forgets that money divides the world neatly." Distaste rolled off every syllable. Rachel nodded once at Marcus and pressed transmit. On his screen, messages flooded in almost immediately, shocked faces appearing on grid view, disbelief blooming into outrage. A few asked if this was satire. It wasn't. When Isabel finally re-entered, he was waiting. The room's silence felt charged like lightning. "You might want to check your live feed." Marcus said evenly. Her smile faltered. She turned to the tablet on his desk and froze as her own voice filled the speakers. Words spoken without restraint now returned amplified, undeniable. "That's not... Marcus, you're twisting something." He shook his head. "Those are your words, Isabel. Every one of them, heard by our partners, our charities, our friends." The color drained from her face. The phone slipped from her hand onto the marble with a sharp crack. From the gardens below, headlights glimmered, the investigators arriving with sworn statements and duplicates of the recorded material. For the first time in their marriage, Isabel had nothing to say. All the eloquent stories and rehearsed manners collapsed into silence. The power she'd guarded with poise and perfume evaporated, leaving only the truth echoing from the speakers. Elegance turned weapon, finally exposed before the world that had worshipped it. Morning light spilled through tall curtains that once made the house seem majestic. Now every gleam only highlighted how empty it felt. The night before had ended in chaos. Investigators talking quietly with security staff, documents exchanged, signatures collected. By dawn, 2 police officers arrived with papers sealed by a judge's stamp. Isabel Cole was escorted out of the mansion she had ruled like a monarch, her flawless posture cracking as camera flashes captured what remained of her composure. Marcus didn't watch from the window. He sat at the kitchen table beside Nora and Leah, the same place he'd found them after all the shouting had stopped. Leah clutched a mug of cocoa with both hands. "Is it really over?" she asked cautiously. "Yes," he answered softly. "No one will ever hurt you here again." Nora's voice trembled. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." "You shouldn't have to thank someone for doing what's right," Marcus said. "But you can help me make sure no one else goes through what you did." He handed her a folder, employment papers, hospital coverage for Leah, and the first draft of a new community foundation's charter. Outside, Rachel Perez closed the trunk of her car, joining them inside moments later. "The footage is verified," she said. "Every organization she represented has already distanced itself, and the civil case will guarantee protection for both of you." Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling the first real sense of peace in years. "Then we start rebuilding." That afternoon, a truck from a local charity arrived to remove Isabel's gowns, jewelry, and luxury furnishings, all set for resale to fund the new foundation's first scholarships for domestic workers' children. Reporters gathered at the gate shouting questions, but Marcus ignored them. As the sun lowered, Leah wandered into his study carrying a sketch she had drawn of her mother cleaning. She with a big smile and a small caption underneath, "Home Sweet Home." Marcus framed it quietly on the wall. Justice hadn't erased the past, but it had opened a door. And for the first time, the grand house no longer felt like a monument to pride. It felt like a place where ordinary people could heal and belong. Weeks later, life inside the Cole estate had changed rhythm entirely. The corridors that once echoed with sharp commands now filled with laughter, Leah's bright, unguarded giggle blending with the low murmur of Nora teaching the new staff that Marcus had hired under fair contracts. The mansion no longer smelled of imported perfume, but of coffee and baked bread. For the first time, it felt like someone actually lived there. Marcus spent his mornings in the converted study where he and Rachel planned the launch of the Open Hands Foundation. The mission was simple: to protect workers from domestic exploitation and to create scholarships for their children. Word of the case had spread, and letters from families all over the city began arriving. Stories of quiet mistreatment, fear, and resilience spilled from envelopes. Each one reminded him why he had acted. One evening, as twilight draped the city in gold, Nora knocked softly on the open door. "Sir, Marcus," she corrected herself, awkward with the new equality he insisted on. "I wanted to tell you," Leah sings while she cleans her room now. "She never used to." He smiled. "That's how you'll know the house is finally all right." Outside, reporters had moved on. The world always searched for its next scandal. Isabel was living abroad, stripped of her memberships and positions, a footnote in the business circles where she once commanded attention. Marcus didn't gloat over her fall. He simply chose not to hate or forgive, only to understand how people hide behind power when they've lost compassion. Later that night, Leah stood in the same spot where she'd once cowered, examining the faint mark still visible on the wall. She touched it thoughtfully, then looked back at Marcus and said, "It doesn't hurt to look at it anymore." He nodded, his throat tightening. "Then we'll leave it there," he said. "Some scars remind us what never to ignore again." From that day forward, the mansion became something of a sanctuary. Staff called it the House of Light, because under its roof, no one would raise their voice in cruelty again. Sometimes Marcus still caught the sound of soft, rhythmic footsteps echoing through the marble halls. This time, they didn't bring dread. They carried hope, walking steadily toward a better world. If this story moved you, tap the button, share it with someone who believes in justice, and subscribe for more powerful stories where truth always wins.